Emperor Kexthul stood at the observation deck of his flagship, watching the blue-green world below with eyes that held no appreciation for its beauty. Earth had always been a curiosity to him, a primitive planet whose inhabitants had barely mastered space travel, while his own Velthari empire spanned 3 galaxies. Yet, here he was, desperate enough to visit this backwater world personally. The medical bay behind him hummed with the most advanced technology in known space. Crystalline healing matrices that could mend bone in minutes. Neural reconstructors that could repair damaged minds. Quantum cellular regenerators that had saved billions of lives across the empire. But none of it could help his son. Prince Zarthek lay motionless in the central healing pod, his small body fighting a disease that their greatest scientists couldn't understand. The child was barely 3 cycles old, just beginning to show the telepathic gifts that marked him as true imperial blood. Now those same neural pathways were being consumed by something their scanners couldn't even properly detect. Your Majesty. High Physician Mordak approached with the careful steps of someone delivering bad news. The latest scans show continued deterioration. The neural pathways are failing faster now. We estimate perhaps 2 planetary rotations before. Kexthul raised a hand for silence, his massive frame casting shadows across the medical equipment. At 9 feet tall with the distinctive ridged skull and silver-blue skin of his people, he was an imposing figure even among his own kind. But right now, he felt powerless. Have the research teams made any progress with the human medical databases? He asked, though he already knew the answer from Mordak's expression. The human's understanding of neural disorders is rudimentary at best, Your Majesty. Their treatments are crude, their diagnostic equipment primitive. I fail to see how beings who still use chemical compounds for healing could offer anything our quantum medicine cannot. Kexthul turned back to the viewport. The Velthari had made contact with Earth only 6 months ago, and his military advisors had recommended immediate conquest. The humans possessed nothing of value, no advanced technology, no strategic resources, no military might worth respecting. Their planet would make a suitable farming colony once the population was properly managed, but something had stayed his hand. Reports from his scouts described a species that seemed to thrive despite their limitations. They showed remarkable adaptability, unusual problem-solving methods, and most puzzling of all, they appeared to care for their weak and injured, rather than simply eliminating them as evolutionary dead weight. Sir, Communications Officer Velran interrupted his thoughts. The human authorities are requesting another audience. They wish to discuss the medical situation. Kexthul nearly dismissed the request immediately. 3 days ago, he had allowed a delegation of human doctors to examine his son, more out of desperation than hope. They had poked and prodded with their crude instruments, taken samples with primitive tools, and ultimately declared themselves baffled. Their leader, a female called Dr. Martinez, had the audacity to suggest that the disease might be caused by stress and emotional trauma. As if the heir to the greatest empire in the galaxy could be brought low by feelings. Tell them I have no time for more primitive guesswork, he began, then paused. Actually, no. Grant them one final audience. But make it clear, this is their last opportunity to prove their species has any value beyond manual labor. An hour later, Kexthul found himself in the same sterile conference room where he had met the human delegation before. Dr. Martinez was there again, along with 2 other humans in white coats, their faces grave. But there was someone new with them, a small human child, perhaps 8 or 9 years old by their aging standards. The boy was clearly from the lower castes of human society. His clothes were dirty and patched, his hair unkempt, and he carried himself with the cautious wariness of someone accustomed to hostility. Most strangely, the other humans seemed uncomfortable with his presence, shooting him uncertain glances. Your Majesty, Dr. Martinez began formally, we asked for this meeting because we believe we may have found something significant. This is Tommy Morrison. Well, perhaps he should speak for himself. The human child stepped forward, showing no fear despite being in the presence of beings who could destroy his entire planet with a thought. His eyes were bright blue, and oddly knowing for someone so young. "Your kid's not really sick," Tommy said simply. "He's just sad." The silence that followed was deafening. High Physician Mordak's breathing apparatus hissed with indignation. "This is preposterous. The prince suffers from a complex neural degenerative." "No," Tommy interrupted, still looking directly at Kexthul. "He's dying because he thinks nobody loves him. I can tell because I used to feel the same way." Kexthul leaned forward, his massive hands gripping the edge of the conference table. "Explain yourself, human child." "My mom got sick when I was little," Tommy said, sitting down in one of the oversized chairs, his feet swinging freely. "She was in the hospital for months. I thought it was my fault. You know, like maybe if I'd been better, she wouldn't have gotten sick. And my dad, he was so worried about her that he didn't really see me anymore. I felt invisible." The Emperor's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted slightly. "Continue." "I got sick too," Tommy said matter-of-factly. "Not like her sickness, but I stopped eating. Stopped sleeping right. The doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong. They did all these tests and gave me medicine, but nothing helped. I just kept getting worse. And..." Kexthul's voice was carefully controlled. "And then one day, my dad came to see me in the hospital. Not to check on test results or talk to doctors, but just to sit with me. He told me he was sorry for not seeing how scared I was. He said he loved me, and that none of it was my fault. And you know what? I started getting better that same day." Dr. Martinez cleared her throat nervously. "Your Majesty, we've been studying the medical data you provided, and there are some interesting parallels. The neural pathways that are failing in your son are primarily associated with emotional regulation and social bonding. In human children, we see similar patterns in cases of severe emotional neglect or trauma." Mordak's translator crackled with derision. "Preposterous. The prince has received the finest care available. He is attended constantly by the most skilled, by servants," Tommy said quietly. "Not by you." The words hit the conference room like a physical blow. Kexthul's eyes narrowed dangerously. And for a moment, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. When he spoke, his voice was low and threatening. "You dare suggest that I have failed my son?" Tommy didn't flinch. "I'm suggesting that maybe he doesn't know you love him. When's the last time you just sat with him? Not checking on his treatment or talking to doctors about him, but just being with him." The question hung in the air. Kexthul found himself thinking back over the past weeks since his son had fallen ill. He had moved the most brilliant minds in the Empire to find a cure. He had traveled personally to this primitive world seeking answers. He had spent countless hours reviewing medical reports and consulting with specialists. But when had he last simply been with Zarthek? "My duties as Emperor require," he began. "Yeah, I bet," Tommy said with the casual wisdom that sometimes comes from children who have grown up too fast. "Adults always have important stuff to do, but kids don't understand important stuff. They just understand whether you want to be around them or not." Dr. Martinez looked nervous about the direction this conversation was taking, but she pressed on. "Your Majesty, human medical research has shown strong correlations between emotional well-being and physical health, especially in developing children. It's possible that the neural degeneration we're seeing is actually a psychosomatic response to loneliness," Tommy finished. "He's lonely, and he thinks it's because he's not worth loving. So his brain is just giving up." Kexthul stood slowly, his imposing height making the humans crane their necks to look up at him. "And you believe that simple affection could reverse neural degeneration that has baffled the greatest medical minds in the galaxy?" Tommy shrugged. "Worked for me. Worked for my friend Sarah when her parents got divorced. Worked for a lot of kids I know who got sick when they felt like nobody cared about them." He paused, then added with startling directness, "But you have to actually mean it. Kids can tell the difference between real love and just going through the motions." The Emperor stared down at this small, dirty human child who had just challenged everything he thought he understood about strength, power, and what it meant to be a leader. In Tommy's eyes, he saw no deference to his authority, no fear of his power, only a strange kind of understanding that seemed far too old for such a young face. "And if you are wrong?" Kexthul asked quietly. "If this primitive human sentiment proves inadequate?" Tommy met his gaze steadily. "Then at least he'll know his dad loves him before he dies. That's gotta count for something, right?" For the first time in days, Emperor Kexthul found himself without a response. This ragged human child had spoken truths that all his advisors, all his technology, all his vast imperial wisdom had somehow missed. The idea was so simple, so fundamentally basic, that it had been invisible to minds trained to seek complex solutions. But as he looked at Tommy's earnest face, something deep in his chest, something he had forgotten how to feel, began to stir. "High Physician," he said finally, never taking his eyes off the human boy. "Clear the medical bay. I wish to see my son." Alone. As the Emperor turned to leave, Tommy called after him softly. "Hey, Mr. Emperor." Kexthul paused but didn't turn around. "When you talk to him, don't use your Emperor voice. Just talk like a dad." And for reasons he couldn't quite name, the most powerful being in 3 galaxies found himself nodding to the wisdom of a homeless human child. The medical bay felt different when it was empty of bustling physicians and humming diagnostic equipment. Kexthul stood in the doorway, watching his son sleep in the healing pod. Without the constant chatter of medical staff discussing neural pathways and treatment protocols, he could hear something he had missed before: the soft, labored rhythm of Zarthek's breathing. The child looked so small, surrounded by all the advanced machinery. His silver-blue skin had taken on a pale, almost translucent quality. And the neural crown that monitored his telepathic development sat dark and silent on his small head. For 3 cycles, this room had been filled with the urgent purpose of saving a prince. Now, looking at his son without the barrier of medical necessity, Kexthul realized he was just looking at a scared little boy. He approached the healing pod slowly, his heavy footsteps echoing in the quiet space. As he drew closer, he noticed things he had overlooked before. Zarthek's small hands were clenched into fists, even in sleep. His face, which should have held the peaceful expression of healing rest, was tight with worry lines too mature for a 3-cycle-old. The Emperor's hand hovered over the pod's control panel. He could wake his son, could try to follow the human child's advice. But what would he say? How did one speak as a father rather than an emperor? The 2 roles had been so intertwined in his mind that he wasn't sure where one ended and the other began. "Computer, deactivate sleep inducers," he said finally. Zarthek's eyes fluttered open slowly, the distinctive purple irises of the royal bloodline focusing on his father's face with obvious confusion. In all the time since he had fallen ill, his father had never been alone with him. There had always been doctors, attendants, someone with an official purpose. "Father?" Zarthek's voice was weak, but the title carried a formality that struck Kexthul like a blade. Even his own son addressed him with the distance of royal protocol. "Hello, my son," Kexthul said, then paused. He had been about to ask how the child was feeling, but that seemed too clinical, too much like the questions the doctors asked. Instead, he found himself saying, "I brought you something." This was not entirely true. He had brought nothing but himself, but as he spoke, he reached into his ceremonial robes and withdrew something he had carried for years without thinking about it. A small, carved figurine that had belonged to his own father. It was a traditional Velthari guardian spirit, carved from stone that was older than their civilization. "This was given to me when I was your age," Kexthul said, placing it on the edge of the healing pod where Zarthek could see it. "My father told me it would keep me safe when he could not be with me." Zarthek's eyes focused on the figurine with more interest than he had shown in anything for weeks. "It is very old," he observed. "Yes. It has watched over many generations of our family." Kexthul hesitated, then added something that surprised him with its honesty. "I had forgotten I still carried it." "Why do you carry it, father? You are the emperor. Nothing can harm you." The innocence of the question caught Kexthul off guard. He looked at this small boy who was dying despite all his power, all his technology, all his vast empire, and realized that his son was right. Nothing could harm the emperor, but everything could harm the father. Perhaps I carry it because being safe from harm and feeling safe are different things, he said slowly, the words coming from somewhere deeper than his usual careful speech. Zarthek considered this with the seriousness that children bring to profound statements. Do you ever feel not safe, father? The question should have been absurd. He commanded fleets that could crack planets. He ruled over billions of beings. He had eliminated every threat to his reign before they could fully form. But looking at his dying son, Kexthul found himself nodding. Yes, he said simply. Right now I feel very much not safe. For the first time in weeks, Zarthek attempted to sit up. The movement was shaky, but there was a spark of something in his eyes that had been absent. Because I am sick? Because I do not know how to help you. And that frightens me more than any enemy I have ever faced. The admission hung in the air between them. In 3 cycles of life, Zarthek had never heard his father admit to fear, uncertainty, or any weakness. The emperor was supposed to be beyond such things. But here was this confession, offered not from emperor to subject, but from father to son. The doctors say my brain is broken, Zarthek said quietly. They use words I do not understand, but I hear them talking when they think I sleep. They think I am going to die. Kexthul felt something crack inside his chest. What do you think? I think. Zarthek paused, his young face working through complex emotions. I think I do not want to die. But I also think maybe it would be easier for everyone if I did. The words hit Kexthul like physical blows. Why would you think such a thing? Because you are so busy trying to fix me. And mother cries when she thinks I cannot see. And all the doctors look worried all the time. If I was not sick, everyone could go back to being happy. Kexthul stared at his son, seeing clearly for the first time the weight this child had been carrying. While adults had focused on neural pathways and medical mysteries, a 3-cycle-old boy had been wrestling with the belief that his illness was causing pain to everyone he loved. Zarthek, he said, his voice rougher than intended. Look at me. The child met his father's eyes, and for a moment, Kexthul forgot about being an emperor entirely. You are not a problem to be fixed, he said. You are my son. If you were never sick another day in your life, I would still want to spend time with you. If you need care for the rest of your life, I will still want to spend time with you. You are not a burden. You are not making anyone unhappy by existing. Tears began to form in Zarthek's purple eyes. But everyone is so worried. Yes, we are worried. Because we love you. When someone you love is in pain, you worry about them. That is what love means. Kexthul reached out slowly and touched his son's small hand. But worrying about someone and wishing they would go away are completely different things. They are? Yes. When you worry about someone, you want them closer, not further away. Zarthek absorbed this, his young mind working through the implications. Is that why you came here alone? Because you wanted me closer? The question was so direct, so perceptive, that Kexthul almost smiled. A very wise human child suggested that I was not spending enough time simply being with you. He said that children need to know they are wanted, not just cared for. A human child? Zarthek's eyes widened with curiosity. The beings from the planet below? Yes, his name is Tommy. He was very small and very dirty. And he knew things that all my advisors had missed. What things? Kexthul considered how to explain it. He understood that sometimes the most important medicine is not something you can see or measure. Sometimes it is just knowing that someone loves you enough to sit with you, even when they have important things to do. Do you have important things to do right now, father? I have the most important thing to do right now, Kexthul said. I am sitting with my son. For the first time in weeks, Zarthek smiled. It was small and weak, but it was genuine. Can you tell me about the human child? About his world? And so Kexthul found himself doing something he had never done before, talking to his son not about royal duties or imperial history, but about Tommy Morrison, a homeless human boy who had somehow seen through to the heart of things that advanced alien medicine had missed. He told Zarthek about Earth's blue skies, and how humans seemed to care for their young in ways that defied survival logic. He described Tommy's fearlessness in the face of imperial power, and how the boy had spoken truth to authority without malice or agenda. As he talked, he noticed something remarkable happening. The tension lines in Zarthek's face were gradually smoothing. His clenched fists slowly relaxed. His breathing became deeper and more even. Most remarkably, the neural crown monitoring his brain activity began to flicker with the first positive readings they had seen in weeks. "Father," Zarthek said during a pause in the conversation, "do you think the human boy would like to meet me?" The question surprised Kexthul. "Why do you ask?" "Because he sounds lonely too. You said he had no home. Maybe we could be friends. I have never had a friend who was not a prince or a princess." Kexthul looked at his son with new understanding. Here was a child who, even while fighting for his own life, was thinking about the loneliness of a stranger. The compassion was so natural, so unthinking, that it seemed to flow from some deep well of empathy that illness had not touched. "I think," he said slowly, "that might be arranged." As if summoned by their conversation, a soft chime indicated someone requesting entry to the medical bay. Kexthul looked toward the door, expecting to see one of his staff, but was surprised to hear Dr. Martinez's voice over the communication system. "Your Majesty, I apologize for the interruption." Tommy asked if he could check on the prince. "He's been quite worried." Kexthul looked at his son, who nodded eagerly despite his weakness. "Send him in," the Emperor said. The door opened to reveal the small human boy, still in his patched clothes, walking beside the human doctor. Tommy approached the healing pod with the careful respect of someone visiting the sick, but without the fearful deference that most beings showed in the presence of royalty. "Hey there," Tommy said to Zarthek, his voice gentle but not condescending. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Zarthek said, and his father realized with a start that it was the first time his son had given that answer to that question in weeks. "Father was telling me about you. He said you are very wise." Tommy glanced at Kexthul with surprise, then looked back at the prince. "Your dad's pretty wise too. He figured out the important stuff." "What important stuff?" Zarthek asked. Tommy smiled, and for a moment, his young face showed none of the premature age that hardship had carved there. That sometimes the best medicine is just knowing somebody loves you enough to stick around. 3 weeks later, the Imperial Medical Bay had been transformed into something that would have been unrecognizable to the Velthari physicians who had once worked there. Gone were the sterile monitoring stations and cold diagnostic equipment. In their place were comfortable seating areas, art supplies scattered across low tables, and what the humans called toys, simple objects designed for no purpose other than to bring joy to children. Prince Zarthek sat cross-legged on a soft cushion, his silver-blue skin now vibrant with health, watching intently as Tommy demonstrated the complex rules of something called rock, paper, scissors. "Okay, so rock beats scissors, scissors beats paper, and paper beats rock," Tommy explained for the third time, his patience seemingly infinite. "It doesn't make a lot of sense when you think about it, but that's just how the game works." "But how can paper defeat rock?" Zarthek asked, his young mind struggling with the illogical premise. "Paper is fragile. Rock is strong. That's what makes it fun," Tommy grinned. "Sometimes the weak thing wins just because that's the rules. Life's weird like that sometimes." Emperor Kexthul watched this exchange from his position near the viewport, marveling at how naturally the two children had formed their friendship despite coming from species separated by millions of years of evolution. The language barrier had proven surprisingly minor. The Velthari translation technology was sophisticated enough to handle most communication, and children seemed to have their own universal language of play and shared laughter. Dr. Martinez approached him quietly, carrying a datapad with the latest medical reports. "Your Majesty, the neural pathway regeneration continues to exceed our projections. At this rate, the prince will show complete recovery within the week." "Complete recovery," Kexthul repeated, the words still feeling impossible despite the evidence before his eyes. Your primitive emotional medicine has accomplished what quantum healers could not. Dr. Martinez smiled, but it was tinged with something that might have been sadness. It wasn't primitive medicine, Your Majesty. It was love. Love was always available to you. You just needed someone to remind you how to use it. The Emperor nodded slowly, his gaze returning to his son. The change in Zarthek had been remarkable and swift. Within days of that first real conversation with his father, the neural degeneration had not just stopped but reversed. The child's telepathic abilities had returned stronger than ever. His physical symptoms had vanished, and most importantly, the light had returned to his eyes. But the changes had not been limited to the prince. Kexthul found himself spending hours each day in the medical bay, not reviewing treatment protocols, but simply being present. He had learned to play simple human games, had listened to Earth stories that Tommy told with animated gestures, and had discovered the profound pleasure of seeing his son laugh without reservation. Tommy, Zarthek said suddenly, looking up from their game. When I am well, would you like to see my homeworld? Father says it has purple skies and floating cities. Tommy's expression grew complex, excited but also uncertain. That sounds amazing, but I don't know if I'm allowed to leave Earth. I don't really have anyone to ask permission from. What do you mean? Zarthek asked, with the genuine confusion of a child who had never lacked for guardians. My mom died when I was 6, Tommy explained matter-of-factly. My dad took off after that. I've been on my own for about 2 years now. The foster system is, well, it's not great. I usually do better on my own. The casual way Tommy delivered this information hit both Kexthul and Zarthek like physical blows. The Emperor had known the boy was homeless, but somehow the reality of his complete abandonment had not fully registered. You have no family? Kexthul asked, stepping closer to the children. Nope, Tommy said with a shrug that attempted indifference. It's not so bad. I know how to take care of myself. But who takes care of you when you are sick? Zarthek pressed, his young mind unable to comprehend such complete isolation. I do, Tommy said simply. Or, sometimes other street kids help out. We look after each other. The Emperor found himself studying this small human boy with new eyes. He had assumed that Tommy's wisdom about loneliness and love came from some inherent human insight. Now he realized it came from something far more profound personal experience, with the very isolation and emotional starvation that had been killing Zarthek. Tommy, Kexthul said slowly, when you told me that my son needed to know he was loved, you were speaking from your own experience of not being loved. It wasn't a question. Tommy looked up at him with those startlingly mature blue eyes and nodded. Yeah, I know what it feels like when nobody really sees you, when you're just a problem to be managed instead of a person to be cared about. It makes you sick inside, even when your body is fine. But you used that knowledge to help us, Zarthek said, his telepathic abilities allowing him to sense the depth of emotion behind Tommy's words. Even though you were hurting, you helped me. That's what people do, Tommy said with a simplicity that somehow conveyed profound wisdom. When you see someone else going through what you went through, you help them. Especially kids. Kids shouldn't have to feel invisible. Kexthul exchanged glances with Dr. Martinez, who was wiping away tears. The doctor cleared her throat and spoke carefully. Your Majesty, I should mention that our government has been discussing Tommy's situation. Given his unique contribution to this diplomatic contact, there's been talk of providing him with a full scholarship, proper housing, maybe placement with a good family. No, Kexthul interrupted, his voice carrying the absolute authority of imperial command. Both humans looked at him in surprise. Your Majesty? Dr. Martinez asked uncertainly. Kexthul looked at Tommy, who was watching him with curious but unafraid eyes. Tommy, you have given my son his life back. You have taught me how to be a father instead of just an emperor. You have shown me that my people's understanding of strength and power was incomplete. He paused, choosing his words carefully. In our culture, such a debt can only be repaid with family. I don't understand, Tommy said. I am offering you adoption into the imperial family. Kexthul said formally. You would become Prince Tommy, brother to Prince Zarthek, heir to the Velthari Empire. You would have a home, a family, and the protection of our entire civilization. The medical bay fell completely silent. Even the ambient hum of the ship's systems seemed to pause. Tommy stared at the Emperor with his mouth slightly open. For once, completely at a loss for words. Really? He whispered finally. Really? Zarthek said excitedly, grabbing Tommy's hand. We could be brothers. Real brothers. But I'm just a human, Tommy protested. I'm not royal or important or anything special. You saved my son's life when the most advanced medical technology in 3 galaxies could not. Kexthul said. You taught an emperor how to be a father. You showed us that wisdom is not measured in technological advancement but in understanding what truly matters. He knelt down to bring himself closer to Tommy's eye level. You are the most important person I have ever met. Tommy looked around the room, taking in the faces watching him, Dr. Martinez with tears of joy, Zarthek with barely contained excitement, and Emperor Kexthul with an expression of hope mixed with something that might have been parental love. Would I still be able to visit Earth? Tommy asked practically. Some of my friends are still here. Whenever you wish, Kexthul assured him. And perhaps some of those friends would like to visit our worlds as well. I believe my people have much to learn from humans about the things that truly matter. And I could help other kids? Tommy pressed. Kids who feel invisible? You could establish programs across the Empire, Kexthul said, beginning to see the possibilities. Teach others what you have taught us about the medicine of the heart. Teach other. Tommy was quiet for a long moment, his young face serious, as he considered the offer. Then he looked at Zarthek, who was practically vibrating with hopeful energy. Would you really want a scruffy Earth kid for a brother? Tommy asked. I want you for a brother, Zarthek said firmly. Not a scruffy Earth kid. Not a prince. Just you. Tommy who knows about rock, paper, scissors, and why kids get sick when they feel alone. Tommy smiled then, the first truly carefree smile Kexthul had seen from him. Okay. Yes. I mean, if you're sure. His words were cut off as Zarthek launched himself forward in a hug that knocked both boys over in a tangle of laughter. Over their heads, Kexthul met Dr. Martinez's eyes. Doctor, I believe my government will want to renegotiate our first contact protocols, he said formally. It seems we have greatly underestimated humanity's strategic value. Dr. Martinez smiled. I think you'll find that humans have quite a lot to offer, Your Majesty. We just don't always package it in the ways more advanced civilizations expect. Indeed, Kexthul agreed, watching as both his sons now helped each other up and immediately began planning their next game. We have learned that the most profound technologies cannot be built or programmed. They must be lived and shared and passed from one heart to another. Later, as the 3 of them stood together at the viewport watching Earth turn slowly below, Tommy pointed to the blue and green marble that had been his only home. It looks pretty small from up here, he observed. Size is not always a measure of importance, Kexthul replied. Your small planet has just changed the course of an empire. How? Tommy asked. By teaching us that taking care of people is more important than conquering them. That understanding feelings is more powerful than understanding quantum mechanics. That a homeless child can see truths that escape the greatest minds in the galaxy. Zarthek pressed close to his new brother, his telepathic abilities sharing the warmth of belonging that flowed between them. Tommy? Yeah? Thank you for telling my father that I needed him. Tommy smiled, his arm around his new brother's shoulders, watching his birth planet grow smaller as they prepared to journey to worlds beyond imagination. Thank you for giving me a family, he said simply. And in the depths of space, between worlds that had never known peace, the sound of children's laughter echoed through the corridors of an Imperial flagship, a small sound that would somehow change the fate of 3 galaxies.